Hello, everyone, and welcome to Breslov Lunchtime Learning. I want you to know that you're all muted, and at the end of the talk, if we have time, I'll explain how to unmute so you can comment and ask questions. Today's class is dedicated for a refuah shlema to Raphael Ben Svia. May he have a very speedy, complete recovery. So this topic, Rebbe Nachman on medicine and healing, is loaded with potholes and pit stops and controversy, because in general, the topic of medicine and healing is loaded with a lot of obstacles. And when we combine Torah, faith, Judaism in with discussions of medicine, things are not always as they seem. And I would like to share with you my main motivation for giving this short talk. Many of you probably have attended. I did an almost 2-year class on anatomy of the soul and mind, body, soul, and Rebbe Nachman's approach to the subject matter. But why am I giving such a short talk? Because so many people, since the pandemic started, have been discussing these topics with me and asking me what the Breslov approach is. My personal, deep, most heartfelt reason for giving this talk is to encourage people to be tolerant and respectful of other points of view. Because the fractures within the Jewish community and within the world at large over this topic, the topic of the pandemic, the appropriate treatments, government's involvement, and so on, has become so polarized and polarizing that people have ended relationships, friendships over this. And it's heartbreaking. You know, Rebbe Nachman says, true peace, true shalom is only an expression of two opposites that can come together and have a meeting of the minds and hearts. Because if you already agree with someone, that's great, but it's very easy to be peaceful with a person. But if two well-intentioned people who both believe in Hashem and both believe in His Torah and have a level of emunah and bitachon, of faith and trust in God, yet they have opposing viewpoints, medical viewpoints, political viewpoints, anything, even a Torah viewpoint, and that causes them to have conflict. So this is the cause of much suffering in this world. It's preventing Mashiach from coming, and in some cases it can even prevent healing. Chas v'shalom. Okay. So I'm going to try to stick to the questions on the flyer, and I'm going to go down the list. So the first question is, was Rebbe Nachman against medicine? So let's define our terms. Today, people define medicine into Western medicine or allopathic medicine, and then complementary medicine, Eastern medicine. What gets lumped in with that sometimes is herbal medicine and homeopathy. These are very different things, but they all get lumped together from somebody with a standard Western medical point of view. Okay? And the idea of what was medicine in Rebbe Nachman's day was very different. So Rebbe Nachman's great-grandfather, the Baal Shem Tov, was a healer, an herbalist as well, and an expert in pulse diagnosis, which today you really only find in the East. You don't find it so much in the West. And the Baal Shem Tov, Rebbe Nachman's great-grandfather, was renowned for his ability to really see into someone's soul and find out what they needed to cure them. And he knew what herbs worked, when to pick the herbs, and when to administer them. Okay? It wasn't just the herbs themselves. There was a time and a place for the healing to begin, which, by the way, the Talmud itself discusses. I'm going to see if I can find the source in front of me, because, of course, I'm going off on the next point. But the Talmud itself discusses that healing, the principle of healing and how healing occurs, is there has to be a healer, a time, and a place. And that's how a doctor heals. The doctor must know the time that the cure is to take place. Sometimes this may happen accidentally. So someone may go to a practitioner of an unkosher medical medicine, because there are some unkosher medicines that are steeped in avodah zarah or idolatry, and they may actually have a cure. They may be cured. Is it the medicine itself that cured them? It might be the combination of the time, the place, and the medicine or treatment. It doesn't mean that the medicine is good for the person's soul, however. So that was the Baal Shem Tov, had an expertise in this area. Now, Rebbe Nachman understood, believe me, who his great-grandfather was, and with a great appreciation, but he himself said that in order for a cure to be effective in a person, in order for treatment to work, the doctor must know the time, the place. He must know exactly when the person requires the remedy. The Rebbe says he must know each individual's nature, okay, as well as the season of the treatment and many, many other variables. And the Rebbe said that with herbs was the medicine of the day. There were some other substances that people took, but with herbs, which today people consider a complementary or alternative medicine, but they're real powerful medicine, people didn't know or appreciate or understand how one herb could differ from another, even of the same species, depending where it was planted, how it was grown, when it was picked, how it was prepared, when it was administered, and so on. And the Rebbe said doctors themselves admit that even the greatest doctor can't take all these factors into account without some minor error. And therefore, they can do some harm with it. Now, it wasn't that Rebbe Nachman didn't believe that medicine could be effective. Okay, when we talk later about vaccines, I'll explain what I mean. But he did understand that some medicine could be very effective. So he wasn't against medicine per se, and he wasn't against a doctor per se, okay? However, he wanted people to be cautious. Now, Rebbe Nachman was no stranger to illness. He himself had tuberculosis. His first wife died of tuberculosis, and he lost 3 infants, 2 sons and a daughter, which was not unusual in those days. And he himself, who didn't want to see doctors, not because he had anything like any personal feeling, but because doctors, especially in his time, had no proven remedies. They had no scientific method, and there were no proven remedies. So he himself didn't want to see doctors, yet we know that he consulted with doctors once on a trip to Lemberg, we don't know the details of it. That we're not privy to. However, at the same time, was Rebbe Nachman pro-medicine? No. And he said because people don't know what they're getting. Now I'm going to immediately jump to the next question is, what about vaccines? Was he against them? So what you need to know is something amazing, and that is that in his time, the smallpox vaccine was developed. And smallpox was it was a deadly disease, and it was ravaging the communities, and children were dying of it. And the Rebbe himself said that parents should go out immediately and get their infants vaccinated against smallpox. The Rebbe was he never made very big proclamations like you must do this and you must do that. But it is reported that he said parent must do this, must get their child vaccinated against smallpox. How does this extend to today's vaccines? So in general, it doesn't, because today's vaccines are all a mixed bag. Some vaccines have been proven safe and effective over time, and others haven't. Okay? So we can't extrapolate and make a blanket statement. Each person must, to the best of their ability, make these decisions along with, hopefully, good guidance, good mentorship, good medical guidance, good personal guidance, good spiritual guidance for themselves. It's very important. Okay? But in his time, he did say that the smallpox vaccine was proven to save lives, and he more than encouraged, he pushed the Jews to get their children, their infants even, vaccinated. Now, I did mention already, obviously, by the way, this can't be a very in-depth conversation. It's a short class, so everything's an overview. But of course, you can always ask me more in-depth questions later, and you can also contact me personally. Okay, next. What about herbs, TCM, traditional Chinese medicine, and other natural complementary medical approaches? So as I explained in the beginning, a lot of the approaches that we consider complementary or alternative medicine were the medicine of his day. And I do want to say that there is some proven effectiveness of these medicines, just as much as there really is in Western medicine, of those that have been studied with a scientific method. And the choice as to whether or not to use these medicines or to use Western medicine, again, is up to the individual. But they would absolutely, without a doubt, be included in Rebbe Nachman's definition of medicine. So sometimes, this is a question that came up more than once in the past 2 years. Well, can I take herbs? Can I take this? They're not medicine. Well, they're medicine. Sure they are. They were medicine then, and they're medicine now. If anything has the power to heal, it also has the potential power to harm. It's an active substance. Okay. So we've covered those first 3 questions in general. Again, we can't go too deep. It's a short class. And I want to go on to perhaps one of the most controversial topics, which is, what did Rebbe Nachman say about doctors? Do Breslovers go to doctors? And are there Breslov doctors? So Rebbe Nachman understood what the Talmud said about doctors. The Talmud said that a doctor is given license to heal. But the Rebbe, as well as other sages, attached to that this other Talmudic concept, which I mentioned before, which is that a doctor is given permission to heal a certain time, a certain place, a certain person, and a certain specific doctor as well, because everything's spiritual. So the Rebbe felt that, especially the doctors of his time, because even though he didn't make this a time or his era a qualifier, but we know that he said that doctors can do a lot of harm, chas v'shalom. He said, as a matter of fact, that there are many disputes. I'm going to actually read from Rebbe Nachman's Wisdom in English for you. He said that there are many disputes in the medical field, and he tells about his time in Lemberg, and he says there were two groups disputing the treatments of a serious disease. One group recommended a bland diet, saying that anything spicy was highly dangerous. The other group said the exact opposite, and that said one said only spicy food should be eaten because sweet and bland foods were detrimental. Each group cited cases, claiming the other's treatment was a death sentence. He said these were among the world's greatest experts, and even they could not determine the truth. Okay. Some experimental evidence, he said, because there were some experiments in those days, not with the rigor of today, he said, sometimes supports one opinion and sometimes the other. Okay. So what we can take from this depends on who we are and what our mindset is. For some people, this means that a Breslover shouldn't see a doctor. Rebbe Nachman himself, who suffered with extreme colitis his whole life, didn't see a doctor. Many, many other Breslovers did see doctors. Some saw them only in serious situations, and some saw them or see them today for not so serious situations. Nobody should have a serious situation, but that's the case. There is a broad range of approach to doctors. Everybody has a personal opinion about it, and the correct interpretation, I'm going to say flat out, the correct interpretation of Rebbe Nachman's views on doctors is truly dependent on who you are, what your community believes, or who you are as an individual. And today I know many, many Breslovers from many different communities with a very wide-ranging viewpoint on these matters. So within Breslov itself, I also know that there are doctors who are Breslov. And the truth is that they became doctors before they became Breslov. And they tend to be among the more open-minded of doctors, and doctors who are willing to look at things from a non-traditional, in terms of Western medicine or even other medicine point of view. So I think that the takeaway for me personally on this is to not put blind faith in anyone, in any expert, to respect people who've spent a lot of time studying medicine. Again, it doesn't matter whether it's Western or Eastern or nutritional or homeopathic, whatever it is, because it is a arduous years of study. And at the same time, to not believe in them as if they were Hashem. Hashem determines what happens, not an individual. In the same way, most people wouldn't put trust in a politician. Not that I'm comparing a doctor to a politician, but or any expert. We put our trust in Hashem. Now, it's true that there are many in the Torah world who say absolutely go to the doctor. The doctor has been chosen by Hashem. This is definitely not necessarily the Breslov approach. Again, this is an individual choice. And whether you're Breslov or not, I hope that what comes a little bit from this idea is respect for other people's individual choices in these matters. And also a healthy dose of a healthy dose of caution when following any course of advice, because Rebbe Nachman's main advice concerning healing is spiritual. A person should approach Hashem first with prayer in order to be healed, and then go to a doctor. Now, what usually happens is most of us, including me at times, we get sick, we don't feel well, something goes wrong, and we immediately think, okay, what can I do? We should be, says Rebbe Nachman, this is a should, this is his advice, immediately Hashem's name should be on our lips, and we should be asking him to help us get through it. There is also another concept, before you go to a doctor, before you see an expert, for whatever the issue is, and whether or not you go, if you decide not to go, and that is something called a pidyon nefesh, a redemption of the soul. Many of you have probably heard of pidyon shavuim, which is freeing a prisoner. A Jew is not allowed to. We don't necessarily believe in prisons per se. And a pidyon nefesh is a liberation or redemption or the freeing of the soul. And in Breslov, we give a pidyon nefesh, and I'll explain what it is, several times a year, whenever we're so moved to do it. We also give it Erev Rosh Hashanah. And also, if God forbid we have a problem, we give a pidyon nefesh. So what is a pidyon nefesh? A pidyon nefesh is money that you give to a tzaddik. And the tzaddik takes that money and prays for you, and he may or may not, depending on what the situation is, distribute it to various charities or his own charities, whatever. And how does this work? So Rebbe Nachman tells us there are 24 courts, one for every hour of the day. And a tzaddik has to be well-versed in the courts in order to have a kind of a prophecy almost, a spiritual elevation in which he can go plead the person's case in one or all of the courts. He has to know which is the right court. So the Rebbe says most people cannot take a pidyon nefesh. They don't know what to do with it. So today, there may be one or two tzaddikim in Israel who can receive a pidyon nefesh, but also today there are people very, very sincere rabbanim who can take a pidyon, and they know how to, even though they themselves might not be able to go to the 24 courts, they know formulas for how that prayer to go up, how that special prayer to go up. Why do we give money? Okay, why does a person give money? Why does a person give a pidyon? Because money is money's blood, money's life. The Talmud says so. We work and we get paid in money, and that represents our blood and our sweat and our time and our energy and sometimes even our tears. And when we give to tzedakah, it averts a gezerah, averts a decree. This is separate from Meiser. A pidyon should not come from Meiser. It shouldn't be the 10% you give, or in the Breslovers case, you give 20% chomesh of your income. But it's something different. How much to give, it depends. Okay? Gitta Kramer always says you should give till it hurts. Okay? You shouldn't be cheap with it. Okay? Because you're giving for your life. And you can give in situations that aren't physical as well. Okay? So there are many times when people in trouble with a court case, whatever it is, they'll give a pidyon. So here's the question. So what if it doesn't work? So like any other prayer, sometimes we don't get the result we want. But it certainly did some good. Just as always giving tzedakah does some good, any charity gift does good, and any prayer does good, but we don't always see the results we want. Many times with a pigeon, though, you do. I've personally seen amazing and heard amazing stories from people. Okay, I've also heard where it hasn't worked in the way that the person wanted it to. So giving tzedakah in the form of a pigeon nefesh is the opening, the energetic opening that gives the doctor permission to heal. Okay? Whether the doctor knows about it or not, it helps the spiritual flow come down and help the healing occur. Okay. So yes, there are Breslov doctors. Many Breslovers do go to doctors. Many don't. And some of my best friends are doctors, in truth. And I have a great appreciation for people in the medical field. Okay. Next question. Why do people get sick? So for this, I'm going to say that I'm going to tell you what Rebbe Nachman says. He has many things he says, but I want to give you one idea from Likutei Moharan 268. The Rebbe says like this: when a person doesn't focus, he fails to focus on the tachlis, the ultimate purpose and goal of life, what's the point of his life? Because the neshama, the soul, is yearning to be aligned with the will of Hashem. The ultimate purpose of life is to have total self-actualization as a Jew, as a neshama, as a human being, as a person, and this must include Hashem and Torah. And the soul this is what all our neshamas want. Sometimes we know it, sometimes we're not aware of it, sometimes it's hidden from us, but this is what the soul wants. But when the neshama, and he speaks of her as a she, okay, when she sees that the person is living up to their spiritual potential, and everybody's different. It's very important that we understand that. Okay, everybody's where they're at. But when a person isn't living up to what their spiritual potential is for that point in time, she becomes filled with so much yearning to return to Hashem that she yearns, chas v'shalom, God forbid, to leave the body. This conflict, this sort of pull of the soul, can cause illness because the power of the soul is weakened, because she's not vested in the body, because the body isn't giving her what she needs. So how does a person's health return? So I'm going to read this part too, and I'm going to read it directly in English. The reason a person's health returns through taking medication is that the soul sees that he is able to control himself and to act contrary to his physical desires and habits. This is really fascinating and important. The Rebbe continues. Perhaps the person's accustomed to eating bread and other foods, but now he curbs his desires and submits to a medical regime, taking bitter medicines for the sake of his health. His soul sees that he has the power to control his impulses in order to achieve a certain goal, and she therefore flies back to him with hope that he will be able to curb his desires, whatever those pulls are, for the sake of the tachlis of life, for the sake of the true purpose, okay, of life. So this is a very fascinating, unique, unusual articulation of one spiritual facet of this idea of why medicine works, why a doctor can help you. Okay? This is, the Rebbe's acknowledging that we're going to go to a doctor. The doctor's going to say, don't eat certain foods. Today's doctors don't mostly say that. If you're lucky, you have a doctor who cares about nutrition, because that's so key. And the doctor's going to give you medicine. The medicine may be a bitter pill, literally. It may be bitter. Certainly if you've ever had a Chinese medical tea, they're very often bitter. And the doctor may give you a treatment and a regime that's uncomfortable, whatever that may be, and you're healed. Because you are able to say, you know what, I'm not going to sit and eat a pint of ice cream. I'm going to follow what the doctor said. And you're giving the soul a lot of hope, a lot of encouragement that you can do this in other areas of life, i.e., that is, spiritual areas of life as well. Okay, this is one small teaching of the Rebbe's on medicine. There are so many more. We will not be able to get to them today, but I think that that's a very, very important one and a very hopeful one, and one that shows that there's another aspect on why medicine works. Now, we can look at why medicine works in the neurological pathways, in the biochemical pathways of the body, and so on and so forth. But no matter what, there's also always a spiritual operation going on. So, okay. So I answered that question in brief. Let me see. Let me go to my notes. Okay. Is Breslov different than other Torah approaches? So I briefly mentioned this. There are some Torah approaches that just say, go to a doctor. Don't, that's it. The doctor's given license to heal. In Breslov, we tend to have the approach of being more cautious about this. We don't think that license to heal, we believe there are caveats to that. And we ourselves take a lot of responsibility for healing as individuals. I would say that the Breslovers in general, and Breslovers I know, no matter what their position is on medicine and doctors, there's a huge range, okay? They take their own part in this very seriously. They're not passive patients, okay? Maybe difficult patients, but they're not passive. And so they will make hitbodedut, they'll make a this about what, every day, and ask Hashem, I'm following this regime, I'm following this doctor, I'm listening to what they're saying, or I'm not taking medicine, I'm praying to you directly for a cure, I'm giving a lot of extra tzedakah, and I'm giving a pidyon nefesh, and so on, and I'm praying, and I'm doing teshuvah, and I would say virtually everyone does that, and we're very conscious of it. And the truth is it's a shame to call this the Breslov approach, because this really is the Jewish approach. It's the time-honored Jewish approach to being cured and healed. To pray, to ask for Hashem's help, to pray about the details of how we're going about getting a cure from a spiritual perspective and a material perspective. And really, this is the Jewish approach. And it's not just Breslovers who follow this, but I would say the approach has become today, people sometimes even forget about where the cure is really coming from, God forbid. Okay? The doctor, the medicine, they can be a shliach for the cure, they can be an agent of the cure. Certainly if they help elicit a cure or they try their best, we certainly have to be grateful to them. And at the same time, we know that ultimately it comes from Hashem, whatever it is. Okay. And I want to just jump back for a minute. There are many reasons that people get sick. I just really wanted to give you that one example. There are many reasons. Rebbe also speaks a lot about diet. And we can talk about that another time. Okay. So I hope I've given you an overview of what Rebbe Nachman said. There are many more things he said. Obviously, we're not going to fit them all into a half-hour share, especially since I gave a 2-year course on this. But I just wanted to give this overview again, specifically, so that people will understand not only what Rebbe Nachman has to say, not only what the Talmud and other Torah wisdom has to say, not only what Judaism has to say, but so that they'll walk away and say, oh, so this is what I believe. This is what is working for me or not working for me. Maybe I need to look deep in my heart and change it, but maybe it's working for me. But it doesn't mean that it's going to work for every other person. And I don't have to engage in conflict over this matter. In many ways, it's a very deeply personal choice. And I think that the fractures in relationships are so heartbreaking to me, and the animosity and the vitriol, it's shocking to me. The actual extreme polarization, we don't have to convince anyone else that there's a right path in terms of this. The only obligation of a Jew is to convince others or to speak to others about having faith in Hashem. And whether or not you're a medical expert, there might be some medical, I know some of you might actually be medical experts and doctors on this line. And either way, whether or not you have expertise, people must come to a lot of these choices themselves. And when we push people into a corner, they tend to push back. And I think it's important that if you there are a lot of brilliant people I know who really are experts, who have a tremendous wealth of knowledge. If you have that knowledge, share it. But know that for some people, they may have a differing point of view, and other people, it may not be the right path for them. As Rebbe Nachman says, there has to be, as he's quoting the Talmud, he's referring to the Talmud, which says, a cure comes about when it's the right cure at the right time and the right person. So we understand that everything's tailored for our individual souls. And yes, that may mean 5,000 people get a cure from one specific medication, but still there's an individual imperative operating. Okay, let me see. Did I have anything else on my list here? Nope. Okay, so within Breslov, there are many points of view, and within Judaism, there are many points of view. And one of the most beautiful things about Rebbe Nachman to me is this respect for the idea that, look, we're all headed in the same direction, hopefully, towards Hashem, yet we're all on slightly different paths to get there. And the Rebbe really gives us many different ways to understand ourselves and to understand what we're doing in this world and to understand what's right for us. Okay, so I want to again say and repeat that this little talk, which was very short, but we're going to open it up to questions and answers, or questions or comments. This talk was dedicated for a refuah shlema, please Hashem, for Raphael Ben Tzvia. Okay. If anybody has any comments, respectful comments or questions, I know there are some strong opinions, respectful comments or questions, you can hit *6. I'll give you a minute, and that should unmute you. I'll give you a minute to respond. Nope. Okay. Sometimes it takes a minute. People have problems. You have to hit the star, not the pound, and the 6. Sometimes it actually takes a minute before people respond. And I know there are a lot of people on the line because I can see it on the website. Okay. All right. So feel free to text me, to email me, to call me. Oh, here comes somebody. Who's this?
Hi, it's
Hello.
Naomi.
Hi, Naomi. Hi, Naomi is somebody with a lot of experience. Go ahead, Naomi.
Thank you for handling this topic so well. It's so reassuring, comforting to know how Rebbe Nachman looks at these, what he teaches on these topics. I have a couple of questions. What in the day, or what would Rebbe Nachman consider evidence? Is there? This is really a contentious topic, and nowadays, because sometimes people would feel that their own observations, their personal experiences are evidence, while others might, feel that we need a study or a published study. How are things handled by Rebbe Nachman regarding, what's considered evidence?
I think that's an excellent question. So I briefly touched on this. I think it's in Nachman's Wisdom, the Rebbe says that, oh yes, it is. It's and you can look it up. It's 50, section 50. He speaks about when he went to Lemberg and all these doctors, and sometimes there's evidence. They have evidence. So even though they did have I said they didn't have a scientific method that we have today with research studies and evidence and so on. But the truth is they did. It was a little cruder than today. So I think he would say that that's the basic scientific method, but I don't want to put words in his mouth. I really don't want to. I can interpret what the Rebbe says on a psychospiritual level, but on a factual level, I wouldn't go there. So I think that, again, look, there's so many angles to this. Many of you may know this. I wrote for many, many years, for a decade, for a psychology website, and I was way more interested, I think, in a more holistic approach to it. But anyways, I read a ton of studies, and while I was always finding flaws in the studies, and I didn't take them very seriously for the most part, especially psychology, but medicine in general has a lot of flawed studies. And then several years ago, at one point, there was a big blow up, and it was shown that over 80% of psychological studies were flawed, or they were biased, or they had deep, abiding errors. And it was shocking to the whole world. I think many people weren't so shocked. I think with medicine we see this too. But there's something else to keep in mind, Naomi, and that is that people change over time, and medicine changes over time. Medicine changes in response to many things. And I think if we're looking for absolute answers within medicine, I think that's a problem. That's, again, I think I'm giving you my opinion based on my understanding of what Rebbe Nachman says. Because we're always looking, we're always looking for that cure, that one thing, or that one supplement, or that one this. And that's going to make us feel better, that's going to heal our loved ones, or whatever it is. And I think there may be that one panacea, and there may be. And it may be hard to find. It may not be, but it may be hard to find. But at the same time, I truly believe that the answer cannot be found without putting Hashem first, and putting our relationship with Hashem first, and getting Hashem in the picture, getting Hashem in on the picture through a variety of methods. Certainly tefillah is the first one. So I know it's not such a direct answer, but I don't want to pretend I have any idea what the Rebbe would say today. Because I you know what, when I hear other people do that, it irritates me, because I don't know what the Rebbe would say today. I'm not the Rebbe. So you said you had a second question?
Well, yeah, just a comment on your response. I think that more and more what's going on these days is that we're finding that we really can't trust any particular source, and that there are flaws in flaws that we're finding in published literature, and just who can we trust, and where do we source our information? There's a lot of obfuscation. So I just want to speak to that for one moment. This is a sign of the coming of the Mashiach. All our institutions are suspect. And when all your institutions, when you realize, I would say most people with a Torah background wouldn't trust government to begin with. We know what governments can do, but sometimes people do. I would say that when you can't trust governments, you can't trust experts, you can't trust
anything, that's when we have space in our hearts for Hashem. That's when we turn to Hashem. But go ahead, please continue. It was an excellent point.
Yeah, thank you. You had said that when it's possible to heal, one can also do harm in the context of the discussion. And it sounded like the opposite of something I'd heard Rebbe Nachman teaching as well, which is when you can destroy, you can rebuild. Is that right? Mm-hmm. Are these related? Or just twins?
So I love the way your mind works. I never made that connection, but it's something I would want to think deeply about before responding, because I love the way your mind works. It's a fascinating point. And perhaps there is when I hear, if you believe you can destroy, you must believe you can repair. To me, very much so, that always expresses the concept that faith is the determining factor. So if you have the belief that you've actually destroyed something, then you can use that belief, that power of faith in yourself, faith in Hashem, to believe that you can actually repair. So to me, it's about faith. So would I necessarily link it to that about something that can harm? It has the power to heal. I don't know, but maybe. I don't know. Think about it. You let me know what you think, and I'll let you know what I think.
Thank you. Okay.
I love your comments. Thank you so much, Naomi. Okay. Any other questions or comments? *6. Hello? I hear somebody.
Hi. Hi, Chaya.
Who's this?
Hi, it's Hope.
Hi, Hope.
It's Hope.
Hi, how are you?
Hi.
What's your question?
Good, Baruch Hashem. It's a question, but it's more of I'm not sure it's a question. So it's very interesting, being recently Baal Shuva, to see kind of what has happened in the community over this issue, and especially what you said, at the very start of the talk, because I was also, I happened to find myself for a totally different reason on a Orthodox social media website, a question and answer site, and I almost never read comments. I have no idea how I ended up in the comments, but it was something, the site is totally open to all kind of questions, but there happened to be some comment about, COVID, and then there was anyway, the comments were exactly what you said. I was horrified at the comments because everybody on this site is Torah observant, right? Because you wouldn't even find your way there unless you were. And really what people were saying to each other, because they had different perspectives on this, was shocking to me. Because
there's different perspectives. There are different perspectives, and I guess for me,
the shocking was, just to clarify, the part that was shocking was someone said, I hope you end up in Gehenna for,
okay, all right. So
they went that way.
Right. So you know what? It's really healthy to avoid the comment sections. Many Rabbanim say don't read them because they're generally Lashon Hara or Rechilas, and I would try to avoid them, to be honest. The kind of people who are going to make statements so dramatic and say terrible things, whether they're Torah observant or not, are really the people that I'm begging in this talk to please respect other people's individual opinions. That's the truth. That's, again, like I said in the beginning, my personal heartfelt motivation. But I wouldn't read those comments. It's really Lashon Hara. It's terrible. Rebbe Nachman says that conflict. He says that conflict must be avoided at all costs. It doesn't mean that you don't stand up for what's right when it comes to Torah. So if somebody says Hashem doesn't exist, you stand up, even in many cases, point of conflict. But over something that isn't really about Torah and faith, because we don't know the answers to these things with medicine. What's the point of getting into these battles? Peace is so important, and I spoke about it at the beginning. October 24th, there's going to be a virtual program. It's on a Sunday. The Karbach Shul is putting together Breslov Day, and I will be speaking on the topic of conflict. I hope you will join. I'll put out the information on the WhatsApp group. But I'm just appalled at the. I'm an opinionated person, but I'm just appalled at the level of vitriol anywhere, and this is toxic. We as Jews should be very much guarding our speech. And yes, we can have passionate points of view, but to hurl epithets and insults is not Jewish. Stam, period. That's it. No question. So I am glad you brought it up, but I would suggest that you don't read that stuff because it's only upsetting and it doesn't get us anywhere. That's my personal opinion.
Okay, so I just want to give that. I just want to give the flip side of that because I was studying Likutei Halachot. And, in the very first chapters, they're rooted, even though it's halacha, they're rooted in Azamara, the teaching of Azamara. And I think it was in the the Kitzur, Likutei Maharan, that Rebbe Nachman in the teaching of Azamara says literally that Geula, the Mashiach, is going to come through the practice of Azamara. That when we are living Azamara, that will usher in Mashiach and Geula. And I literally could, I went there. I went there in consciousness and could see the truth of that. Right? So that's the total opposite of Azamara, really. Right?
So our job is to practice Azamara, which is to see the good point in ourselves and others, to find that good point and to not look at the bad. We're, as Jews, we have, how does a man guard his eyes? He doesn't look at, underdressed women, okay? How does a woman guard her eyes? So I would say a man also could guard his eyes this way, is to not look at somebody's negative, or at least try not to look at it, to not call people out from it, and to look for the good. And that is really what Azamara is. It's easier said than done, but you can train yourself in it. You could train, and so it doesn't mean that we go seeking the bad to see if we can find good. We're not supposed to look for the good in the bad. We're supposed to look for the good in the person, because the bad is bad. It's not a question. Meanwhile, it's a very interesting comment, and I appreciate it. I'm glad you're on the line, Hope, and I wish you well. Are there any more questions or comments? We have 5 more minutes before we go. I was going to make this 45 minutes, but we can go for an hour. Anybody else? Nope. Okay. So I want to wish up. There we go. Who's this?
Marianne.
Hi, Marianne. How are you?
I'm good, Baruch Hashem. How are you?
Good. Could you talk a little louder into the phone? I'm having problems hearing you.
Sure.
There you go.
It was just something I was thinking of when you guys were talking about the comments and things like that. And I know, within myself, sometimes I'll react to situations or I'll say something in a situation, and I ask myself, I was davening and asking myself, why would I react this way? And something that I had read, that everything comes down to emunah and a lack of emunah. And I realized that I was reacting in this way because I was fearful. And sometimes we react in different ways or say things simply because we're fearful of something, and that it's a lack of our emunah.
Yes.
I don't know if that's relevant or...
Yes. it's extremely relevant. It's not necessarily something I touched on, which would be, why is there so much contention around this? You're speaking to the motivation. And yes, people are fearful, and fear and anger are twin sisters. They're angry and they're fearful, and they're struggling with their ability to put Hashem before you always, which is what Emunah is, which is what faith is. And so, sometimes it's good to talk to people who may feel that way and explain to them, or say, I'm trying so hard to put Emunah first, to put Hashem first, to put faith first, and our conversation is very painful to me, and maybe we can change the subject, and so on and so forth. And sometimes it's not worth having that conversation. But when speaking to motivation, absolutely. The reason why, look, at baseline, the reason why we all engage in, every single one of us engages in behaviors and desires that aren't healthy for us physically, mentally, emotionally. We may crave kavod, we may be fearful, we may be angry, it could be a million things, okay? Whatever those things are, ultimately at baseline come from a lack of emunah and bitachon, ultimately. Now, there are many levels in between, but the more faith we have and the more trust in God we have, the more we become impervious to the ups and downs in life, because life is always going to have good moments, please God, and it's always for sure going to throw us curveballs. That's what we're doing here. We're facing all these curveballs. And if we can only maintain our equilibrium when things are going smoothly, we're in big trouble, because things will not always go smoothly. And so people get into control issues, and they get into all kinds of issues. And so your point is well taken. What is the motivation? And to remind ourselves that the motivation, that person who's flipping out, may be fear, maybe anger, maybe, whatever it is, and maybe perhaps reminding them that Hashem is here and Hashem loves them could be helpful. It also might push their buttons. So I do think it was relevant, and I thank you, Marianne. I do thank you, and I hope we get a chance to speak soon. Okay, so we're going to go now. We're out of time, and I know that I didn't cover every topic, obviously. Next week, I had another similar event scheduled, but it's been postponed. But we'll hopefully do a Breslov by the person who wanted it scheduled. She had to postpone, but hopefully we'll do another Breslov Lunchtime Learning, maybe on a related topic. If you're interested, let me know. And I wish you all a very, very good week, and I do hope to see you and hear from you at upcoming